Welcome everyone to our Stearns Financial live chat. Today we're going to be talking about fourth quarter issues, champions and fumbles. And we have an all-star panel of our financial planning gurus at Stearns Financial. So we have Lindsay Brock, we have Courtney Kidwell, we have Paula McMillan, and we have Teresa Talton. So literally all of our financial planning team members are going to contribute to this discussion. And this is one of those interesting things where we're supposedly towards the end of the pandemic. There have been a number of pandemic fumbles that have occurred for people, not just in the fourth quarter of life, but second and third quarter. But as we approach the end of this, there are just a number of issues that we are seeing among our clients that we thought would be good to talk about. And by no means are these all the issues. We don't have time to go through all of that, but we're going to go through quite a bit of some of the things that are financial and non-financial that we are seeing happen out in the marketplace. And so the reason we called this pandemic misdirection is that the pandemic, again, has caused the focus to be on coronavirus, when in fact, a number of people are having issues that have nothing to do with the coronavirus. Some are related, a lot are not. And so again, that's where we're going to talk about today. Just a reminder, our original fourth quarter fumbles research that took over 2 years concluded that these are the 4 key areas for having a more successful fourth quarter of life. And by the way, turns out third quarter of life, these are pretty darn important too. The how much, which is how much do you need to have a good life in the fourth quarter of life. Your why do you get out of bed in the morning? Your who do you hang around? And your where do you live? And then the real secret sauce ingredient, for those of you who read our fourth quarter fumbles book, is how do you do some of those things? So a lot of people know intellectually these 4 keys to successful aging, but sometimes the how trips them up. So our first pandemic fumble, not getting regular checkups. And so Teresa, you want to help us walk through this one?
Sure. Good morning, Dennis. Thank you for having me. There are many facets to this pandemic, obviously, one of which is that people have delayed going to the doctor for their regular checkups. We know that in the beginning, we just weren't sure what to do. We didn't have necessarily the same information that we have today. And so we were fearful of going to the ER if there was an issue, or going to the doctor for just things that we thought we didn't really have to do. So people did delay going. And we've heard too many stories of people, maybe having heart attack symptoms, don't go to the ER and end up dying in their home. And, that is tragic. And we've heard too many stories. Those are the things that we do know. What we don't know are if there are any long-term ramifications for the delay that we have seen this far. At first, people were delaying maybe because they were fearful and we didn't have a lot of information. Where could we go? How was it safe? How could we do this safely? And later on, people were losing their jobs, therefore losing insurance. So then it became, I don't have insurance, so I can't really afford to go and have these procedures or these preventative measures diagnosed. And nearly half of all Americans say that either they or someone they live with has delayed going to the doctor. And we know that these are going to cause or we think these are going to cause long-term issues. We know that if you can, get an issue or a health issue, especially find it early, it's much easier and less costly to fix it at that point. And at the moment, they're expecting, just for the fact that people are delaying cancer screenings, such as mammograms and colonoscopies, they're expecting, by some estimates, about 10,000 extra deaths over the next decade, just for breast and colon cancer. So that is significant, and that's something that we, one thing that they've estimated, but of course there are going to be other ramifications. We had a external or an extended Stearns family member story that I can share. Someone who did go in for her mammogram. They did find cancer. She underwent surgery. She's fine, but they told her that if she had waited 6 months, she would have died. So, sometimes you think, oh, I can delay it, it's no big deal, but we don't know. So hopefully people are feeling a little more comfortable going to the doctor now. I know around here in my area, when I go, they send me the paperwork ahead of time. I wait in the car until they pull me back directly. There's no one in the waiting room. You're not allowed to bring people. So there's a very, minimal amount of interaction that you have with other people. So between the vaccine and the procedures that places have put in, hopefully people are feeling more comfortable to go back and start those going back to the doctor visits. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Going forward.
Yeah. Well, so the importance of trying to get in as soon as you can to get whatever that normal checkup is. I still remember sitting with a CFO of a major company. I was at one of the national health clinics getting ready to have my annual checkup. And he said, I really wasn't sure that the money we were spending on this was worth it. And then they did the scan of my organs and they came up with something. And if I hadn't caught it early, I'd probably be dead. And now I think it's worth every penny. So again, some of this gets back to, what value does your health have?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think on the next slide, we're going to talk about, things that you can do at home. So obviously going to the doctor is important, but we have some control over our health at home. We know that we're supposed to be eating right and going and exercising, but even if we can just go out and walk at this point, it's great because are having really nice weather here in North Carolina. You can get some sunshine, some vitamin D. We know that helps our mood, and maybe you'll even get a chance to see a neighbor and talk from a distance. So
good. And before we leave this one, I do want to mention the cognitive baseline test. This is something that came out of our original Fourth Quarter Fumbles research. Since then, there have been a number of studies and national experts who have said this is a really good idea to be able to start getting a baseline of your cognitive ability so that if it blips off that baseline, you'll know it. Now, some people say, well, I'll know it if I'm forgetting more things or if I'm having issues. And certainly people around you may observe those things, but a lot of times there's not something that will give you an immediate feedback loop. Oh, I need to go get this checked out. And we've even had a few people who, when they felt like it needed to be checked out, they were fearful of having it checked out because they didn't want the diagnosis. They were fearful that it was going to be an Alzheimer's, but it turns out that some of the drugs that have been developed, we may not be able to cure dementia and Alzheimer's, at least today, but some of the drugs that have been developed will delay it, but you have to catch it early. So again, this is another one of those on the brain health side that I think most of us would say, let's try to catch it early and kick the can down the road. Hopefully by the time they develop a drug that can actually cure it, maybe you can delay it long enough. Okay, so Teresa, back to your comment. Sometimes just taking a walk is a valuable exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. We know we're supposed to do all these other things, strength training and flexibility training and so much cardio per week, but anything that we do is better than nothing. So just getting up, and I kind of trick myself sometimes and say, I'm just going to do it for 10 minutes on days when I just don't feel like doing anything. I'll say, just do it for 10 minutes. And then I get up and whatever it is, I'm, into it after 10 minutes and I'm listening to my podcast and I keep going. But there's so many benefits just to getting up and going outside when weather is, an option, when it's an option for you based on the weather.
Yep. Well, and it's kind of interesting because I was at a conference with one of the people who wrote Younger Next Year, a brilliant aging specialist. And one of the themes of Younger Next Year was extreme exercise, cardio and lots of other things happening on a regular basis. And what was interesting is all the people around me in the audience said, well, that was really interesting. I don't think I can ever do what he just talked about. And so, virtually everybody can go take a walk. So
absolutely.
Yeah, do what you can do, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So again, back to that, health is our number one asset. Some of the work that we've done at SFG in the financial planning area, we've had different studies that we've looked at, extra cost in retirement of poor health. And it seems like $250,000 is kind of the general number of extra cost, but in some cases it's a lot extra. And again, this last item, what's the life impact of poor health? Not being able to enjoy your financial independence, and that's priceless. And the other piece that we discovered in our original research, and again, it's borne out in our life experiences of this entire group that's with you today on almost a weekly basis, is that your health affects not just your how much, but it affects your why, your whole approach to why am I getting out of bed in the morning. It approaches your who you hang around, who you feel like you want to have in your network. And in a lot of cases, it affects your where you live. Folks who get into poorer health are less inclined to move around or try to get to a place to live that is really feeds their soul. So there's just so many things that can create a vicious cycle in the health area. So social interaction, Teresa, you touched on this. Let's talk about this important one.
Sure. So we know that we have to take care of ourselves physically, but how we interact or how much interaction we have with others really also affects our mental, emotional state of being. As humans, we know that we are meant to be around others. There is plenty of research showing that having social relationships with others actually helps regulate our emotions, helps us cope with stress, which of course can increase your immune system, which can lead to less illness and disease over the long term and better health. And then, enter the pandemic and we were told, oh, stay away from other people. You have to distance from one another. And this became a very challenging front for so many reasons. Not only did you have to stay away from people, but you also sort of felt guilty. Like, should I go see my family who I haven't seen in 6 months? Because a new baby was born and I want to see my niece, but am I going to infect people or put people at risk? That in addition to just the fear of contracting it, just the sort of guilt that some people feel about some of the decisions that they've made, make it difficult. We had an issue in our home where it's not really an issue, but we wanted our 17-year-old son to get a job last summer, but we knew that he needed to be out because so many of his activities had been canceled, and he'd been going to school from home. He still is. He's been here for a year now, going to school from home. And, that's hard on that, especially that age. It's hard on everyone, but especially in that age when they're so used to being really active. And so after Christmas, we finally decided that it was time for him to go get a job, even though we were like, well, should we do that and possibly expose him but he really needs to be out and around people. And so we did make that decision, and he does have a part-time job, and all of us in the house think he's happier. It wasn't that he was unhappy before, it's just we can tell a difference. And so that's something that that we all have to make those decisions. But we know that being away from people is not great for us. You know, there are definitely the older population has struggled probably more than people who are able to work and maybe have kids at home and kind of keep busy with normal life. That if you've been fortunate enough to have your life kind of continue as normal, which I have had. And then your younger people also are very affected by it because they just can't do the things that they used to be able to do. And this is, you know, something we've had to sort of embrace and get creative around. And people have formed what they call bubbles. So they'll decide that they are going to pick a couple of friends or another couple or another family, and that they are on the same wavelength with that family as far as how to be safe. And they're willing to hang out with just that group. My parents live in a different state, and my brother lives in the same town that they live in. And he has two little toddlers who are adorable. And so for the first couple of months, my parents isolated and they didn't see really anyone. And finally, after a couple of months, they were like, you know, we have to see someone. And so they decided that my brother and his family, that was their bubble. And that really, they are the only ones who they've seen this pretty much this entire time. We haven't seen them in a year and a half. And so, you know, that's important for people to do that. And that's one way that you can have some social interaction, but it's limited. And then we've also gotten creative on with online presence, which has been really helpful and great. I'm grateful that we live in this day and age when we have this, because we've had birthday parties online. I was in a birthday party with someone in another state who I normally wouldn't be able to go to his birthday party and see some other friends who lived in other states. And they hired someone to come in and moderate a trivia night for us. So that was pretty cool. And then we've had some baby showers here at Stearns. We're growing in that way this year. And we're about to have another baby shower. And then just to throw out an idea for people, I don't know if you've heard of Jackbox, but it's a way you can have sort of a game night on your TV and connect with other people at their home. You have an app on your phone, they have apps on their phone, and you connect up and you can play and have game nights. So fortunately, we've been able to be sort of creative with these bubbles and online presence. And we live in a day and age when we're able to do that. But I know people still want to go back out there and be physically with others, and with the vaccine on the horizon for so many people, hopefully we'll be able to return to some normalcy soon.
Teresa, I love that. I'm just going to jump in and say I love that you brought up the COVID bubble, because that's something that my husband and I have had to do. I am an extrovert through and through. This has been very difficult for me to be missing all of my friends and being out and about, going to brunch or a restaurant or anything really, concerts, live music. So it's we've found two other couples, and so there's 6 of us. We're all at the same stage in life. We're all expecting, and it's actually been wonderful that the 6 of us can get together and have, the guys have drinks, the girls have mocktails, and and it's just been really nice that we've been able to share that with each other, so we can still take part in the online presence of our larger groups, but we have this strict COVID bubble that feels very protected with just who we're seeing face to face.
Yeah, very good. That Mars-Venus piece has been really interesting. We've heard a lot of stories about that in the bubble. And again, this gets back to one of the precepts in the original Fourth Quarter Fumbles research and book, is tending the friend's garden is pretty darned important as you're getting older. You're all saying, well, tending the friend's garden is important in second and third quarter of life as much as it is in the fourth quarter. Yeah, very good. All right, and I should mention this piece about latest research on brain health in the new book by Sanjay Gupta, the CNN healthcare guru. his book basically says crossword puzzles are a B- on keeping your brain sharp compared to the social interaction, especially with new and interesting people, is an A. So nothing against crossword puzzles, but there are other ways to lean into this. And again, from our original research, the who you hang around is the source of a lot of good decisions, but also many fumbles. And so we've told stories in the past of, in particular, the one that a lot of people remember is the Panera men's group that was causing health issues with one of our clients because all they did was sit around and talk about how everything's broken and everything's bad. And he broke away from that. And today he's off all his medications and is living a much happier life. You know, he considered himself on a 10 scale to be a 2 on happiness while he was involved with that group. And now he's a 9. So it's something to think about in terms of who you hang around. So that gets us to having a good reason to get out of bed, which, by the way, we've had several discussions with some of our fourth quarter champions, people who are really thriving in the early go-go years of the fourth quarter and into the pandemic. And they just keep mentioning this one. So Courtney, talk to us about the importance of having a good reason to get out of bed.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, in the fourth quarter, you have to come up with a why, since your world is shifting from the go-go of work and raising children. The pandemic has also shifted that for everybody in every age and stage. We went from going into the office to staying at home and looking at the same four walls for quite a bit and the same people. And if you were lucky enough to still have a job, you were on Zoom and, seeing the same picture of everybody behind you all the time. So you have to get a little more creative. It's hard to, just like the Panera Men's Club, you have to kind of learn where you want to get your information. A phrase that I heard was, don't see the world through headlines. So you kind of have to make your own this last year, we've had politics, we've had economic issues. Different things are inundating us with information about the pandemic, the vaccine. So you kind of have to start looking more inward at what's important to you to get you out of bed and not just turn on the television and watch the gloom and doom. So, if what's important to you, what would bring a smile to your face. So if you are fortunate enough to have a family with children that are around, or even if it's like Teresa's grandparents that are able to be with the toddlers, if that family unit, you can go out, take walks. I have several family friends that are embracing hiking. Their kids are old enough and they have a goal of, X number of hikes per year that they want to do, or they've got just specific hikes that this year they're trying to do. So when you have soccer games and basketball games and baseball and all of that with kids, your world kind of gets taken up by those sort of outside forces. So this has kind of given us a reason to look inward at what's more important to us, and our family unit is one of them. If you don't have the kids, that still could be your spouse, or it could be a friend or some friends that you've developed a pod with. Outside of your family or friends, it might be an opportunity to look at something more charitable. Again, if you've been able to be consistent with your employment or income and haven't been affected by the job losses and anything else more negatively, you might see an opportunity somewhere for helping out in the community. I know personally, we live across the street from the school my children go to, and for much of this pandemic, the lunch ladies have come out and been serving lunch for the students in the school, and anybody in the neighborhood with kids can come and pick up food. And I noticed that every Friday there's another car parked there as well, because there's so many kids in our community that do not have access to the food that they need. And this was its backpack beginnings. They would bring a car with a supply of food for the weekend. So parents could come through, get the food from the lunch ladies, and then pick up an extra bag of food that they'd have to go through the weekend, so that the kids aren't going without just because they're not in school. And that is volunteers that are doing that. And those are people that are looking for a different way to help. They might not have money to give, but they might, in the pandemic, have now more time than they didn't have before. Another thing that I know you've probably heard with Stearns is the more environmental, the ESG investing. So you may not have more time now or be able and comfortable to get out and do something volunteering, but you may be making a difference now through doing your investments in a different way. Whether it's the environment or, how many women are present on a company's board, what's important to you, you can impact even throughout not physically being there. So you have to kind of look into yourself and see what's important to you and find a way that you can connect with it, even if you're doing it via Zoom or through writing a check, if you're able to. So what I really like to quote that just said, like I said, don't see your world through the headlines, create your own headlines every day. And an example was, husband loves his wife today, or grandchild makes grandma smile with a simple phone call. So you have to just kind of bring it down. It's not the big fancy things always that can bring a smile and joy to somebody. But if you just take a deeper look inside and think of the little things, my son calling his grandparents yesterday morning, I heard about it all day long about how happy they were that they got to talk to him yesterday morning. So just think about what makes your heart happy here.
Yeah, very good. Well, and we do have a comment from one of our watchers talking about people in a Harvard study were most satisfied in their relationships at age 50, were the healthiest at age 80. So maybe that also means that having your headline right when you're age 50, maybe age 30, I don't know, is a good thing. So again, a lot of this, we're talking about fourth quarter fumbles and champions, but can apply to almost any age. I would remind our listeners that several of the folks who contributed to the research in the book said, well, when does fourth quarter really start? And one of them in particular, she said, my fourth quarter is going to start around age 74. However, one other person said, well, all the men in my family die early, so my fourth quarter started at age 60. So again, I think some of this is relative and a state of mind. Again, back to what you were talking about, Courtney. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here's a interesting one, marital strife. So we've all heard the old joke, which turns out to, in a lot of cases, be true, married for life, but not for lunch. So Lindsay, walk us through some of the issues on this one.
Yes, this is definitely shown a unique challenge as more and more of our clients and our friends and our family are spending so much time together at home. Spouses that typically had either work obligations that were outside of the home or even just private lives themselves and could be away from each other during the day are finding that maybe they shouldn't spend every waking moment together and every meal together. So if you're feeling that pressure, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You are not the same person as your spouse. That's not why you probably got married in the first place. You got married because you make a good team and a good couple. And so we are hearing about some marital strife, and obviously any marriages that were on the rocks before this pandemic have been challenged. There have also actually been some opposite cases where we've heard of very wonderful, successful clients who have now refound the reason why they love their spouse, and we love hearing that. But if that's not you, that's okay. So just a reminder that you together are not one person. You are two unique, different people, and it is okay to spend time apart as well as together. You can go for walks together, like Teresa suggested, or you could go for walks apart and listen to your own podcast, listen to your own music. I have to tell you, my husband drives me bonkers when he's here all day and I'm working, and I just want to say, can you just go somewhere else? So I think that's a big deal. And I hope for everyone listening that they have been able to kind of pick up on ways that they are reiterating why their spouse is their best friend, but it's okay if not. And the most important thing is to stay healthy and stay communicative and compromise if needed.
Well, and I think that last point is very important, Lindsay, because some of the situations that we've seen kind of moving in the wrong direction are because one spouse has become depressed or had other kinds of issues that they just haven't thrived. Again, pre-pandemic, this was true. Pandemic, it seems to have accelerated some people not thriving, and then that creates more discord in the relationship.
Yeah, and I would also go back to one of our prior points about your broader social circle. You don't just need to spend time with your spouse. You can include those other couples or your friends, and finding ways to laugh it off and commiserate a little bit. I know that my girlfriends and I enjoy talking about what our husbands have done wrong in the last week or so to annoy us, and I'm sure vice versa, for the record. But that's okay. It's healthy, and it helps it helps you remember that you're not alone.
So can you do a bowling league virtually? I don't know about that. We'll have to think about that one.
Maybe on
There's
the
Wii bowling.
yeah,
Bowling.
Okay. And before we move off of this topic, it's probably good to remind everybody what is probably common sense for them, and that is the impact of gray divorce. As everybody knows, one of our partners wrote a book on that, Gray Divorce, Silver Linings, Holly Madasser. And the fact is that gray divorce for a lot of families does have a devastating impact on both finances and the family. And so the question is, if you can't get a relationship to work, is it better trying to stay together, or is it better to not stay together? And again, we're seeing a lot of different examples of this within our clientele and our extended network of friends of the firm around the country. And again, I would say there's no one size fits all for this. Everybody's got to figure out their own path, what they're willing to settle on, deal with. But we would suggest strongly getting the right counseling, and emphasize the word right, because not all marital counselors are perfect for particular couples. And so there's a lot of ways to think about that. You can get references from different people, but most people don't like to spread around the fact that, oh, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, and who would you suggest? If we can do a therapy in the meantime, there's still a stigma in our society on therapy. So again, to the extent that we can help, we're happy to participate in helping individuals or couples think through some of these issues. All right. Let's see, got another comment here. Heard about some really courageous grandparents learning and challenging their grandkids on electronic games online. Okay. It's maybe not tennis or virtual bowling, but it might be fun. We have heard of some of our clients who are grandparents challenging their kids to do art online every week, where they get together and they paint together, literally online. They're both painting something, and we've heard a variety of other stories. I haven't heard about electronic games, though. Interesting concept. All right, so that brings us to depression and anxiety tied into what we had talked about before. And here I know Lindsay and Courtney both have some perspectives on both the adult side of this as well as the kid or grandkid side of this.
Yeah, I think Dennis, you led us right into this with your prior comments about therapy and the stigma that therapy for depression or anxiety has in our society. And that frankly is wrong and sad. And I think that we are at a door where we can open up that stigma a little bit more for both adults and children who are struggling. This is a really unique time where it can be very, very overwhelming. And so I think we should stress that there is nothing wrong with therapy and seeking out help, either in your circle or with a professional. And I know Courtney and I have talked at length about the difference between adults and children with how to handle all of these feelings they have.
Yeah, I think what I always hear, whether it's discussing parents getting a divorce or any kind of stress in a kid's life, that, oh, kids are resilient, they're fine. So through this pandemic, we keep saying they're resilient, they're going to be fine. And a lot of kids, most kids are, but they are not all one size fits all. And in an adult, you can tell an adult can say, I'm stressed out, or this is making me anxious, and they can get medication easily for that. For a kid, and talking in the 12 and under or so, they're still dealing with emotions and understanding their own emotions. So they may not know what they're feeling. They feel tense, they feel scared. I personally have twin boys, and one of them is more anxious, and he is more worried about the coronavirus. Germs make him nervous, so he is trying to determine, what's safe, what's not safe. And even when we try to say, it's okay, let's do this, he's still anxious about it. And what we sometimes with kids think when they're acting out that they're just being bad, and they, ADHD gets thrown out as a label a lot of times. Apparently, anxiety and ADHD, ADD have very similar symptoms in some kids. So you have to be careful. You can't just self-diagnose and say, my kid can't sit still. There could be a very real scared fear underlying what's happening. And again, whether they're 9 or 29, therapy is helpful for them. The therapist can help give them tools to know how to deal with it. And right now, not being in school for a kid that's in 3rd grade and is used to seeing their friends and now is just seeing their brother all the time, that's a stress too, because you just need some outside stimulation. You've got kindergartners that it didn't occur to me. I was talking to a teacher and I said, well, how are they doing? Because you just think kindergartners wearing a mask in school. They don't know any different. This is school to them. This is their first exposure to it. So they don't know that there's a cafeteria that they need to be going, or they would be going to eat lunch in. All they know about school is that school is in their classroom. So they're actually doing better school-wise than some older kids that are having to shift, whether they're remote or still in school, but having to stay distance. So while we think about the parents and the older people that are isolated, having stress about all of this, it trickles down to the smaller ages too. And you have to really listen and talk to them and go to professionals. And I know for firsthand experience, they're booked. So you need to find somebody, but there's somebody out there that can give them the tools to help understand what they're dealing with and what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and Courtney, you and I have talked about this at length. I have a niece who is just learning to put her words together and what those feelings really mean. So for young children who don't even know what these big little feelings inside mean, that I can't imagine being in a little body with all these big feelings. but as adults, we're expected to name these feelings and we're expected to deal with them and handle them. But honestly, a lot of us adults, and I use that term very, very loosely as adults, because it could be anywhere from teenagers to people in their 70s and 80s. We are expected to handle ourselves. And I would just remind you that these are called feelings for a reason, because you are supposed to feel them. If they're not meant to be numbed. So if you are sad or disappointed about what is going on, that is okay. And to recognize that feeling and work through it. We have seen older kids, those who are in high school or college, who are really struggling right now. Obviously, there's data that isn't even available yet on the rates of depression, anxiety, and unfortunately suicide or things like that for that age group, who don't feel the support from their friends that they would normally get throughout high school or college. And then even after that, those in their 20s and 30s are still figuring their lives out. So I think that this could affect any age, from childhood when you're first figuring out what feelings are, to when you're an adult and you're trying to figure out who you are, through when you know who you are, but you're not sure what's the right way to perform or behave in a society that is affected by a pandemic.
Yeah, I think mostly for any age, what's most important now is if you have feelings or if you are feeling off, just to talk to somebody, reach out, whether it's to a friend, a professional, something. Just there's no stigma to asking for help.
And to just add to that, and not to wait for someone to reach out to you, because sometimes they won't. And our suicide rates, especially with boys 18 to 24 years old, are way up. Our young girls are especially being attacked with the social media, some anxiety there. There's a great Netflix documentary out called Social Dilemma. I would encourage anyone with children especially to watch that in support of their children, because who knows what kind of stress your children or grandchildren are under. It's a different world than when we were young. And just being able to support those around us. Older people, the older we get, the more we like hugs, and we're not able to hug those people. They need our hugs and we need their hugs. And so finding ways to send a card or give hugs in alternative ways. So all ages, just reaching out. I think this slide speaks to that, just loving people in creative ways.
Okay, thank you all. That's some really important information. We do need to move on here to stay on time, but thanks for all that contribution. So now we get to financial anxiety, and we've talked a lot about the uncharted waters we are sailing in, and again, for a lot of people, that creates additional anxiety. So, Paula, walk us through some of the issues here.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. All of what we've talked about today, I think, we know someone that's impacted, whether it's us or someone else. Well, this is just another layer on top of that, because money always matters. You can't get away from it. And whether we should be feeling some level of stress about money or not, we all do. This happens at every socioeconomic level. So some of that is natural, right? We all feel financial stress daily. It's completely natural and it's healthy. It reminds us to set those guardrails we talk about so much in financial planning, so that we keep our saving and spending between the lines. And so when things are going well, we eat more steak. When maybe not quite as well, chicken, maybe even beans. However, financial anxiety, different from stress, takes it a step further. So the financial anxiety, it's basically that uneasy and unhealthy attitude toward the way we engage with our personal finances. And what good is it if we have more than ample resources, if our health is failing us from stress-induced ailments? As Dennis had mentioned before, I think he said, what value does your health have? I think that was a good question. So while there is a lot of jubilation that we've made it this far through the pandemic, with celebrated market highs and low rates for those who were able to refinance mortgages or use it for their businesses, it causes a lot of us to pause with concern over what's next on the investment, the political, and general social fronts. We're widely seeing clients and friends try to reconcile what often seems like conflicting news that they're hearing delivered from media that is often widely distrusted. So again, this is layered upon stress they're already feeling at home and maybe at work. So what are we seeing working with clients during these uncertain times? I would say most clients seem to be handling these stresses well. The ones that seem to be most successful are those who focus more on what they can control. This is a big word for us in financial planning because there is a lot you can control, and to be able to isolate that and feel like you're doing something can be very empowering. Financial planning has been a great source of comfort in this regard. So we look at changes in our clients' current lives and possible changes in the future that they might be worried about to figure out what's plan A, what's plan B, and even plan C. I find financial plans to be the best remedy for this financial anxiety that ails a lot of people. It can provide the new perspectives and peace of mind. In addition to revisiting a financial plan or creating one for the first time, other clients have had some success in limiting their news intake. We are always encouraging them to not stay tuned in to the talking heads because it will make you crazy, because that's what they're paid to do, generate, keep you tuned in. So they'll create headline after headline to entice you to stay on, and also widen the sources of news that you're getting, that you're receiving. So you have that balanced picture. Remember those algorithms that Dennis has talked about in past presentations that follow you everywhere. I mean, our technology is so wise today, and they're tracking us. And if you're reading about something that's worrying you, inflation, well, guess what? You're going to get a ton more articles on inflation, where if you're on YouTube, they're going to serve those up. So just be very proactive in the news you seek out and try to get it from different sources when you are trying to educate yourself. And then I think everyone's talked a little bit in various parts of the presentation about the friend's garden and making sure that that stays healthy. If you are finding that when you hang up from a friend you talk to on the phone or the computer, you're consistently feeling depressed or hopeless, then, if you can't help them and that's bringing you down, you really have to maybe add to that friend garden and do some tending so that you have positive influences. But in any case, don't be too hard on yourself for feeling financial anxiety, some level of it, because as Dennis will share next, these times do produce a lot of questions to be grappled with. He was recently featured in I'm sorry, who was it, Dennis? The Street, going over some issues that we're going to be talking about next. And he did some extensive research on it, things that he already knew about and additional.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. And that's all good stuff. These are just a few of the conundrums we have today. Now, whether they create anxiety or not, I think, again, is how you put them in perspective, how we can talk through the pros and the cons of some of these issues and how they fit your financial plan, your financial roadmap. So again, I think those pieces have lowered anxiety in a number of our clients. This core versus explore piece we've been talking about quite a bit with clients and in our newsletters lately. And the concept is, what do you need as the core to get you to financial independence or stay there if you're already there? And then the explore piece, we do have some clients who are hearing about all the things going on and in different areas where there's big money being made. And so they do want to explore a little bit. Well, an easy way to do that is to carve out a certain amount of money. And this has always been true, by the way, not just pandemic related. The other piece that's giving some people problems as they approach the fourth quarter, so maybe in their 50s, is the fact that in the old days, we talked about the ideal portfolio for retirees was 60% stocks, 40% bonds. And in the old days, the 40% in bonds actually paid some reasonable money. And so we've had a number of clients who are kind of anxious about, I'm approaching retirement, and will bonds make enough so we can even do 60-40? Now, again, we have been researching a lot of different ways to have alternatives to bonds. And we are at one of the lowest bond allocations in the history of our firm right now. But for a lot of people, bonds still have a place in a portfolio as an ultimate shock absorber to major calamities that can happen. So again, I think talking through how are we mitigating the risk, what are we doing, those things can help lower anxiety. US versus international, that one is a anxiety producer for some people because they have a home country bias. They would like to see the United States thrive, and they're not sure if they're somehow being disloyal by investing more internationally. And the fact of the matter is that I think you have to not really fixate on a particular asset class or don't fall in love with a particular investment. Of course, we've been preaching that for decades. And you can be in like with something, just don't fall in love with it. And again, be flexible in the asset allocation. Same thing for the growth versus value issue. And this has been a very complex issue for people approaching the fourth quarter or in the fourth quarter of life. Is the old playbook was that retirees should have 85% in dividend paying value stocks. Well, that playbook has been completely torn up the last decade, and particularly the last 5 years by the rise of the growth stock. So we've talked a lot about that in our chats, and I'm sure that's going to continue to be a source of discussion about what's the right balance between growth and value. And then finally, the prudent use of alternatives. That's something that we're talking to a lot of our clients about is, well, okay, there's other asset classes beyond just cash, bonds, and stocks today. And how can we use some of those to get to goals to lower portfolio volatility or portfolio anxiety? So this is a relatively recent study, National Academy of Sciences. And this kind of turns some of the discussions we've had in the past on its ear about, does money buy happiness? And so historically, and some of you may remember many years ago, we had the Harvard expert on happiness who talked about the fact that there seemed to be a plateauing effect at $75,000 a year of income. And that tended to be true, not just for fourth quarter folks, but third quarter and second quarter as well. And that sometimes when you got well above that, other problems came along, other challenges, other anxieties when you had a lot of money. Well, this study is pretty interesting, and it divides it between evaluative well-being, the darker bars, and experienced well-being. So what's your mood and feeling throughout your daily life? And it does seem to indicate that more money does buy happiness. And so we are going to dig into this one deeper on a future chat for those who are interested in this topic. This is some important new research as well. Again, doesn't surprise us because of the number of financial roadmaps that this group that you're with today does, just in terms of what the asset allocation mix does to your odds of achieving financial independence long term. And this particular piece out of Morningstar suggests that 3.5% withdrawal rate may be the new best withdrawal rate to be able to have your assets last for a longer period of time in a scenario where bonds are not paying you as much money as they did for a previous generation. And so what you see on the bottom there where it says 3.5, you see that the 4 of the bars are in a pretty high percentage success ratio from all the way from basically 75% bonds and stocks to 100% stocks. You'll also notice that as you go over to the right, your higher withdrawal rates do make it more challenging to have bonds. And actually, in many cases, if you have a very high withdrawal rate, having bonds in this environment based on Morningstar's analysis almost guarantees failure. So we've talked about this before in previous SFG research, and the point is that there's some happy balance for everyone in between being too conservative and being too aggressive can be a problem as well. I mean, some of this research suggests that having 100% in stocks gives you your highest percentages of success, but that's only if you could stand the volatility, if you could stand the heat in the kitchen. Because having 100% in stocks, we have a lot of clients that while that might technically be a good solution long-term, is a real challenge in terms of the volatility day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year.
Dennis, do we know about what age withdrawals are starting for this graph?
Yes, I believe they're starting at that hypothetical retirement age of 65, which we also know that we have a lot of clients who are not retiring at 65. I mean, we have some that are retiring earlier, but we have some that are now retiring later, or they have other sources of income. Maybe they're doing some part-time consulting. I mean, again, retirement is all over the board today. And that's another reason why you take some of this information you see on the screen with a grain of salt, because it's very unique to your own situation, as our 4 expert financial planners on this call would attest to. You know, your unique facts and circumstances dictate how this is going to work out for you. This we featured in the inflation special report live chat that we did recently, just showing which areas go up in retirement. They tend to be recreation. Now, maybe not during a pandemic, but certainly post-pandemic, recreation, and then medical care, and what areas go down. And just a reminder that we do expect some pent-up demand. One of our clients calls it retail therapy or travel therapy. So there will be some probably extra spending post-pandemic, and that's okay for a lot of people. Again, the team on this call for your own individual roadmap can help you figure out, you know, what's okay and what's too much. We did have a client this morning, by the way, ask the interesting question, well, what if I signed up for one of those Elon Musk travel things to Mars? I think she was kidding. I think she's really thinking about buying an RV. But again, I think you if you have a roadmap and you've done the work, you can put those what if scenarios in Mars or RVs or whatever and figure it out a little better. All right, and this is just a reminder that in our inflation chat, we did mention that artificial construct of the consumer price index, that we do expect people in their early years of retirement and later years of retirement to be experiencing in the next 3 years a little bit higher rates of inflation, but they do depend on how you spend money. And the lifestyle expansion piece, if your post-pandemic travel plans are to say life is short and I'm going to go for 5-star resorts instead of 3, well, that's a different matter altogether in terms of inflation. And again, you have to figure out what's reasonable in your own budget. So again, not surprisingly, how much ties directly to the why, the who, and the where. So that gets us to decision fumbles. Paula, talk to us a bit about the decision fumbles.
Okay, I will make this brief, but I would encourage everyone to read the book Decisive, because there actually is a great way to apply process to decision making so that you make good decisions around what Dennis had just talked about. So you see some villains here to our decision making: narrow framing, not looking at enough options, confirmation bias, short-term emotion, overconfidence. Where I'd like to spend my time is talking about widen your options. That's one way that you can make better decisions. So as you come up with options, take them away and then say, what are some more options? Take those away. What are some more options? Then attain some distance from your short-term emotions so that you can make clear decisions. Ask yourself, you know, what would you advise your best friend to do? Because that may result in a different answer. And then also reality test those assumptions. So once you've done that vanishing test where you've taken away the extra options and come down with some better options, and then you've asked yourself, is that something your best friend would do? Then take another step and say, once you have that good option, is there some way I can test it? Like someone might do, we're taking a vacation to an area before you move there, for example, and then prepare to be wrong finally. So your fourth test would be to just, what's a tripwire to see if I made a bad decision. So if you join a gym, for instance, put a reminder on your calendar 3 months down the road to say, have I been going to the gym 3 times a week? So that if you haven't, you might want to discontinue the membership. These are just a few ideas, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. And in that spirit of, we are hoping that everybody takes away at least one good idea from all of these ideas that you've heard about. That piece that you talked about, Paula, in terms of find at least one more option. It turns out the studies have shown that CEOs of major corporations are often guilty of this as well. They think of option A, option B, and so some of the best CEOs and some of the best fourth quarter champions always look for the third option. Always say, it may not be obvious, but let's think about, is there a third option? All right. And I will mention, as the sole male on this, that some of those decision issues that you mentioned, Paula, unfortunately, men are more prone to a few of those than others. So this is our attempted humor around that. And again, some of these fourth quarter skills that we talk about, they increase your ability to bounce back. We don't have a whole lot of time to talk about stories around that, but we have just observed that some of the best bounce backs are people who are doing more of the things that they should be doing, and the people who don't bounce back aren't. Gratitude challenge, again, our thanks to Dr. Gary Brott, who has done some gratitude work for us in the past on our live chats. And so just a reminder that our brains, we like to think that we're all highly civilized, but there's a piece of our brain that takes threats that it thinks it's seeing, and it puts you on high alert. Well, in a pandemic, it's the equivalent of having a saber-toothed tiger outside your cave every single day. And so even if you're not as worried about the pandemic, well, I'll survive it if I get it, you're surrounded by people who may be worried or anxious, and they're still a part of you. I have a very good friend who on the surface says, I'm not worried, but then behind the scenes is very anxious about the pandemic. So again, just a reminder that the 24/7 media that several folks on this call have mentioned creates a threat-based world. It creates a world because they want to get you tuning in. They want it to be a Daytona car wreck all the time to get you tuning in to, oh, what's the next car flipping in the air? And so disconnecting it was probably the best advice I heard on this call today. But self-awareness, good coaching, again, who you hang around, you heard that a couple of times on this call. Your mental and physical wellness, that dictates your ability to hang in there better. Better nutrition for the mind. If you're going to listen to podcasts, listen to ones that are uplifting or that feed your soul, as you heard several of our speakers talk about. And then the small changes day by day. We highlighted a lot of this research in the Fourth Quarter Fumbles book, that your brain doesn't like big change. It's the reason why when you have New Year's resolutions, they hardly ever work out. Your brain doesn't like big change, and it sabotages people from big change. So sneak up on your brain, make small changes day by day. Your brain won't go into threat mode. And it turns out that is a secret to a lot of fourth quarter champions. And then finally, the 5 pillars of brain health. This is again from Dr. Gupta's new book, Keep Sharp, which we would highly recommend. Good book. Move, discover, relax, nourish, and connect. And if you can do something in all 5 of those areas every single day, Sanjoy believes, and the research, he thoroughly documents a lot of the research on this, that you will be in a much better place in keeping your brain sharp longer. And most of us, maybe all of us, would prefer to keep our brain sharp as long as we possibly can in life. So with that, we are going to wrap it up because we handled a few questions and a few of the audience comments as we went along. Again, I would like to thank our all-star financial planning panel, Paula, Lindsay, Teresa, and Courtney, for all of your input. And again, this will be available within a few days to look at in our recording on our YouTube channel. With that, I will sign off and hope that all of you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.